The Veltirian armada materialized from hyperspace like metallic predators emerging from the void, their crystalline hulls gleaming against the star-scattered darkness. Admiral Krevnash stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Domination's Edge, his four eyes fixed on the tactical display showing Earth's orbital defenses. "There," he hissed through needle-sharp teeth, pointing a taloned finger at a sleek vessel maintaining position near Luna. "The human ship they call the Wraith's Echo. Intelligence reports it has destroyed 12 of our scout fleets without taking a single hit." The ship in question appeared deceptively small compared to the massive Veltirian dreadnoughts, its hull a matte black that seemed to absorb light itself. No visible weapons adorned its surface, no massive gun batteries or missile. Odds to untrained eyes, it looked almost fragile. "Admiral," his tactical officer Zephyra consulted her instruments with growing unease. "Our sensors cannot penetrate their hull composition. We're detecting massive energy signatures, but their source remains unclear." Krevnash's mandibles clicked with anticipation. For 3 cycles, the Veltirian hegemony had been carving through the outer rim of human space, expecting the same easy conquest they'd achieved against 17 other species. Instead, they'd encountered unprecedented resistance, and that resistance seemed to center around vessels like the one before them. "Deploy the capture web," he commanded. "The hegemony's scientists will dissect every molecule of that ship to understand their technology." The Domination's Edge and its escort vessels began their approach, exotic matter projectors charging with eldritch energy. The capture web was their most sophisticated non-lethal weapon, a quantum entanglement field that could immobilize anything smaller than a moon. Captain Vexandra Holloway watched the approaching fleet from the bridge of the Wraith's Echo. Her augmented neural interface processing tactical data at superhuman speeds. Born in the asteroid belt colonies, she'd grown up in zero-G environments that would crush most terrestrial humans, her bones and muscles enhanced through decades of genetic therapy and cybernetic integration. "Ripley, what's our status?" she asked her AI companion, her voice carrying the subtle harmonic distortions of someone who'd undergone extensive vocal cord modifications for deep space communication. "All systems operating at peak efficiency, Captain," the AI responded, its voice a melodious blend of frequencies that seemed to resonate from the ship's hull itself. "The Veltirians are deploying what appears to be a quantum restraint system. Analysis suggests they intend to capture rather than destroy us." Vexandra's enhanced eyes glowed with bioluminescent implants as she smiled. "How thoughtful of them. They want to study our technology." Her fingers danced across neural interfaces that existed more in her mind than in physical space. "Let's give them something to remember us by." The Wraith's Echo had been humanity's first successful attempt at weaponizing folded spacetime itself. Built using principles discovered in the ruins of an ancient civilization on Kepler 442b, it didn't carry conventional weapons. Instead, it manipulated the fundamental forces of reality, turning physics itself into a weapon. As the capture web engaged, something extraordinary happened. The Wraith's Echo didn't resist the quantum entanglement. It embraced it, using the alien technology as a conduit to extend its own exotic matter manipulation fields throughout the Veltirian fleet. "What's happening?" Krevnash roared as his instruments went haywire. "Why aren't we detecting the human vessel?" The Wraith's Echo hadn't been destroyed or captured. It had translated itself into a higher dimensional space, becoming something between matter and energy, between presence and absence. To the Veltirian sensors, it had simply ceased to exist. But Vexandra and her ship were very much still there, watching, waiting, and preparing to demonstrate why humans had survived in the universe's darkest corners. The Veltirian fleet hung motionless in space, their capture web still active but containing nothing but empty vacuum. Krevnash's tactical displays showed impossible readings, energy signatures that existed and didn't exist simultaneously, gravitational anomalies that defied their understanding of physics. "Admiral," Zafira's voice carried barely controlled. "Panic. We're detecting massive spatial distortions throughout the fleet. It's as if space-time itself is becoming unstable." Aboard the Wraith's Echo, now existing in a state of quantum superposition between dimensions, Captain Vexandra felt the ship's consciousness merge more fully with her own augmented neural network. This was humanity's greatest secret there. Most advanced vessels weren't just ships, but symbiotic entities that bonded with their crews on a level that transcended mere technology. "Ripley, initiate Protocol Phantom," she whispered, her consciousness expanding beyond her physical form, to encompass the ship's distributed intelligence network. "Protocol Phantom active, Captain. We are now operating in 7-dimensional space while maintaining quantum coherence in normal space-time. The Veltirians cannot detect us, but we can observe and interact with them at will." The Wraith's Echo had become something the aliens couldn't comprehend. A ghost in their machines, a presence that existed in the spaces between their thoughts. Through their capture web, which still connected all the Veltirian ships, Vexandra began downloading their tactical data, their fleet compositions, their communication protocols, and most importantly, the location of their homeworld. Krevnash paced his bridge like a caged predator. 3 hours had passed since the human ship's disappearance, and his scientists still couldn't explain what had happened. Could they have destroyed themselves rather than face capture? Negative, Admiral. His chief science officer, Dr. Mort Keth, manipulated holographic displays with nervous precision. There was no energy release consistent with a self-destruct sequence. The quantum signatures suggest they've somehow folded themselves out of our dimensional reference frame. That's impossible. Our models show that such technology would require... The conversation was interrupted by an alert from the communications officer. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission. It's from the human ship." Vexandra's voice filled the Veltirian bridge, but it no longer sounded entirely human. The dimensional translation had changed her, made her something more than she had been. "Greetings, Admiral Krevnash. I am Captain Vexandra Holloway of the Terran Defense Force. You attempted to capture my vessel. I consider this an act of war against humanity." Krevnash's 4 eyes widened. "Where are you? Show yourself, human." "I am everywhere and nowhere, Admiral. I am in the spaces between your thoughts, in the quantum foam beneath reality itself. Your capture web was educational. Through it, I've learned much about your species, your technology, and your intentions." The implications hit Krevnash like a physical blow. Their own technology had been turned against them, used as a conduit for espionage on an unprecedented scale. "Your homeworld," Vexandra continued, her voice now seeming to come from the ship's hull itself. "Veltyros Prime, orbiting the red giant Kethmoran. Population, 47 billion. Orbital defenses, quite impressive, though I suspect they're designed to repel conventional attacks." "How do you?" Krevnash began, but Vexandra cut him off. "I know because I am already there, Admiral. While we've been talking, another aspect of my consciousness has been traveling through folded space-time to your homeworld. The Wraith's Echo exists in multiple dimensional states simultaneously. We are here and we are there, and we are in places that haven't been discovered yet." The tactical display on the Veltirian flagship suddenly flared to life, showing real time. Images of Veltyros Prime, impossible images that could only have been captured from within their most secure orbital facilities. "This is impossible," Mortketh gasped. "The quantum mechanics alone would require computational resources exceeding the total energy output of a star." Vexandra's laughter resonated through dimensions. Doctor, you're thinking too small. Humanity doesn't just use technology, we become it. We don't just manipulate physics, we dance with the universe itself. The transmission ended, leaving the Veltirian fleet alone in space, their capture web still active, but containing only the echo of something that had transcended their understanding of reality itself. On Veltyros Prime, the crystal spires of the planetary capital reflected the crimson light of their dying star. Supreme Overlord Nexaverus stood in the highest tower of the Hegemony Command Center, his 6 arms manipulating holographic interfaces as reports flooded in from across their empire. The human vessel has vanished completely, reported Fleet Commander Quindareth via quantum entanglement communicator. Admiral Krev Nash's fleet is returning to base, but their morale is compromised. Nexiverus's primary eyes narrowed while his secondary pair scanned tactical displays. The Veltirian hegemony had conquered 17 star systems through superior technology and ruthless efficiency. They were masters of quantum manipulation, their ships powered by harvested singularities, their weapons capable of cracking moons. How could one small human vessel pose any real threat? Supreme Overlord, his intelligence advisor, Ythagara, materialized beside him through molecular transportation. We've intercepted human communications from their outer colonies. They're calling it the Phantom Protocol. Our linguists believe it refers to some form of dimensional warfare we haven't encountered before. Before Nexaverus could respond, every display in the command center flickered and went dark. When they reactivated, they showed the impossible, detailed schematics of Veltirian military installations, command codes, and most disturbing of all, the locations of their hidden weapons research facilities. A new voice filled the chamber, speaking flawless Veltirian with harmonic overtones that suggested intimate knowledge of their neural patterns. Supreme Overlord Nexaverus, I am Captain Vexandra Holloway. We need to talk. The Overlord's chromatic skin shifted through stress patterns as he realized the implications. How are you accessing our secure networks? Our quantum encryption is, theoretically unbreakable. Theoretically, yes. Vexandra's voice seemed to come from the very walls themselves. But you're operating under the assumption that consciousness is limited to single-dimensional states. Humanity learned long ago that awareness itself can be distributed across multiple quantum realities simultaneously. Holographic projectors, throughout the command center, activated without authorization, displaying an image that made every Veltirian present recoil in recognition and fear. It was Vexandra, but not as she had been. The dimensional translation had changed her fundamentally. Her human form now seemed to exist in multiple states simultaneously, her consciousness clearly no longer bound by conventional physical limitations. You see, she continued, gesturing, to displays that showed real-time surveillance of their most classified facilities, your species evolved in a stable solar system with predictable physics. You developed technology to manipulate the universe from the outside. Humanity evolved in chaos. Solar storms, tectonic instability, a moon large enough to create tidal forces that would destroy most worlds. We learned to adapt not just to our environment, but to become part of it. Dr. Klevthani, the hegemony's chief xenobiologist, studied the readings with growing horror. Supreme Overlord, the energy patterns we're detecting suggest this isn't just advanced technology. They've somehow achieved a form of technological singularity that allows consciousness to transcend physical limitations. Vexandra nodded approvingly. Your scientist understands. The Wraith's Echo isn't just a ship, it's a new form of existence. We discovered the ruins of the architect civilization on Kepler 442b, beings who transcended physical reality eons ago. They left behind not just technology, but a path to evolutionary transcendence. The implications crashed over the Veltirian leadership like a gravitational wave. If humanity could create beings that existed beyond conventional physics, their entire military doctrine was obsolete. What do you want? Nexvarus asked, his voice barely controlled. Justice, Vexandra replied simply. Your fleets have killed millions of humans in unprovoked attacks. You've targeted civilian colonies, research stations, even hospital ships. You believed we were weak because we don't build massive fleets like yours. The displays shifted to show battle footage from human colonies. Veltirian dreadnoughts reducing cities to ash. Transport ships filled with refugees being vaporized without warning. You were wrong, Vexandra continued. We don't need massive fleets. We just need to be willing to become something more than what we were. And now, Supreme Overlord, you're going to learn what it means to face humanity when we stop holding back. The transmission ended, but the message was clear. The war between the Veltirian hegemony and humanity had just entered a new phase, one that would test the very limits of what it meant to exist. The Veltirian hegemony's most advanced detection arrays swept the space around their homeworld in desperate patterns, seeking any trace of the human vessel that had somehow penetrated. Their defenses without triggering a single alarm. Supreme Overlord Nexvarus had mobilized every asset at his disposal. Gravitational wave detectors, quantum fluctuation sensors, even experimental devices that could theoretically detect disturbances in the fabric of space-time itself. Nothing, reported Chief Science Advisor Relkithos, his forearms manipulating holographic interfaces with increasing frustration. It's as if the human ship simply doesn't exist in any dimensional framework we can perceive. Meanwhile, Vexandra drifted through the quantum foam surrounding Veltyrus Prime, her consciousness distributed across 17 different dimensional phases simultaneously. The transformation that had begun when she activated the Phantom Protocol was accelerating. She could feel her humanity slipping away, replaced by something vast and terrible and beautiful. Ripley, she whispered across dimensions. Run diagnostics on my neural patterns. Am I still me? Captain. The AI's response carried harmonics of concern that hadn't existed in its original programming. You are becoming something unprecedented. Your consciousness now spans 4.7-dimensional states. You retain core personality patterns and memories, but your cognitive capacity has expanded beyond baseline human parameters by several orders of magnitude. She could feel it, awareness expanding like ripples in a cosmic pond. She wasn't just observing the Veltirian homeworld anymore, she was experiencing it. Every electromagnetic pulse, every gravitational fluctuation, every quantum interaction was part of her sensory matrix now, and she was angry. The rage wasn't the hot, burning fury of human emotion. It was something colder, more absolute, the wrath of a force of nature finally unleashed. Images flashed through her expanded consciousness. The colony ship New Harmony vaporized with 12,000 civilians aboard. The research station at Kepler 186F destroyed while broadcasting surrender signals, children's evacuation pods targeted by Veltirian fighters for sport. Begin Phase 2, she commanded. Across Veltyrus Prime, infrastructure began failing in ways that defied explanation. Power grids flickered and died as quantum fluctuations disrupted the fundamental forces holding their technology together. Communications arrays twisted into impossible geometries as localized space-time became unstable. Transportation hubs found their matter transmitters randomly depositing passengers in empty space light years away. Supreme Overlord! Fleet Admiral Torvash burst into the command center, his chromatophores flashing emergency patterns. Our orbital defense platforms are experiencing catastrophic failures. The quantum foundations of their weapon systems are dissolving. Nexvarus watched in growing horror as real-time feeds showed their most powerful defensive installations literally coming apart at the subatomic level. How is this possible? Those platforms were built using singularity-forged matter. They should be impervious to any known weapon. Not weapons, came Vexandra's voice, now seeming to originate from the quantum vacuum itself. Physics, I'm not attacking your defenses. I'm convincing reality that they never existed in the first place. The revelation struck the Veltirian leadership like a physical blow. Their technology, no matter how advanced, still operated within the conventional framework of universal laws. But the humans had apparently learned to rewrite those laws. "This is your final warning," Vexandra continued, her presence now manifesting as subtle distortions in the air itself. "Withdraw all Veltirian forces from human space. Pay reparations to the families of those you murdered. Submit to judgment by the Galactic Council for crimes against sentient species." "And if we refuse?" Nexaverus challenged, though his voice carried less conviction than before. "Then I demonstrate why humanity earned the title Death World Species long before we left our birth system." The Supreme Overlord's response was interrupted by emergency klaxons throughout the command center. Dr. Klevthani's voice crackled over the communication system. "Supreme Overlord, we're detecting massive quantum instabilities in the stellar material of Kethmoran itself. Our star is beginning to show signs of accelerated nuclear decay." Through her expanded senses, Vexandra felt the Veltirian star's fusion processes like a beating heart. She had learned to perceive the quantum interactions that powered stellar cores, and with that perception came the terrifying realization that she could influence them. "Your star has perhaps 10,000 years left in its natural cycle," she said, her voice now carrying harmonics that resonated through multiple dimensions simultaneously. "But quantum mechanics is probability-based, Supreme Overlord, and I've become very good at adjusting probabilities." The threat was clear. A being who could manipulate quantum interactions at the stellar level could potentially trigger a premature supernova, wiping out not just Veltyros Prime, but the entire star system. For the first time in Veltirian history, the hegemony faced an enemy they couldn't comprehend, couldn't fight, and couldn't escape. The hunt had become something far more terrifying, a reckoning with forces beyond their understanding. The emergency session of the Veltirian High Command convened in the deepest bunker on their homeworld, surrounded by layers of exotic matter, shielding that could theoretically withstand a direct hit from a weaponized black hole. Yet as the most powerful beings in their empire gathered, each one felt exposed, vulnerable to an enemy that had transcended the very concept of physical limitations. "Options," Supreme Overlord Nexaverus demanded, his 6 arms spread wide in a gesture of desperate authority. "I want every theoretical physicist, every quantum engineer, every military strategist to provide me with options." Chief Weapons Designer Zakthul activated a holographic display showing their most devastating armaments. "We could deploy the reality fragmenters, weapons that literally tear holes in space-time. If this human exists in multiple dimensions, perhaps we can collapse those dimensions around her and risk destabilizing the quantum foundations of our entire star system," Dr. Relkithos interjected. "The human demonstrated she can manipulate stellar processes. Any attempt to damage the dimensional matrix could give her more leverage over local physics, not less." Fleet Admiral Torvash paced the chamber with agitated steps. "Then we negotiate. We've conquered 17 species, but we've never faced anything like this. Perhaps retreat is the wisest—" His words were cut off as every surface in the bunker suddenly became transparent, revealing the vast cosmos beyond. They were no longer looking at walls. They were looking through them, as if the matter itself had been convinced to stop absorbing light. Vexandra's presence filled the chamber, but not as a simple projection. She existed in the spaces between atoms, in the quantum fluctuations that gave substance to matter itself. When she spoke, her voice came from inside their own neural pathways. "Admiral Torvash speaks wisdom," she said, and the Veltirians recoiled as they felt her consciousness brush against theirs. "But wisdom came too late for the families at New Terra Colony, too late for the researchers at Kepler Station, too late for the children whose evacuation ships you destroyed for sport." Supreme Overlord Nexvaris forced himself to maintain composure despite the existential terror of facing a being who could rewrite reality. What? What are your terms? Unconditional. Surrender of all Veltirian military forces. Immediate withdrawal from all occupied territories. Full reparations to every species you've attacked, calculated at the current rate of your empire's total economic output for the next 2 centuries. And her presence intensified, becoming almost physically painful to perceive. Personal accountability. The chamber fell silent. Personal accountability was not a concept the Veltirian leadership had ever contemplated. Their species had evolved as a collective consciousness where individual responsibility was distributed among the group. You will submit to judgment by representatives of every species you've wronged, Vexandra continued. Those who ordered the attacks on civilian targets will face consequences. Those who carried them out will face consequences. Those who profited from conquest will face consequences. Dr. Klevthani, trembling with barely controlled fear, raised a tentative appendage. And if we comply, will you leave us in peace? Peace is earned, Doctor. Your species developed faster-than-light travel, matter manipulation, consciousness transfer technology. You had the capability to explore the universe as partners with other species. Instead, you chose conquest. You chose to define yourselves as predators. The walls around them shifted, becoming windows into the destroyed human colonies, the burning research stations. The civilian ships turned into expanding debris clouds. But, Vexandra's tone carried a note that might have been mercy, humanity understands the difference between justice and vengeance. Comply with our terms, and we will help you rebuild. Your species has potential for greatness beyond conquest. The choice is yours. Chief Weapons Designer Zach Thule made one final desperate attempt at defiance. You cannot monitor our entire empire. Even with your abilities, you're still just one being. His words died as he realized the truth. Vexandra wasn't just one being anymore. The quantum entanglement networks the Veltirians used for faster-than-light communication throughout their empire had become conduits for her consciousness. She existed in their most secure facilities, their military bases, their research stations, their civilian population centers. I am in your communication networks, she confirmed. In your transportation systems, in the quantum infrastructure that powers your civilization. I am the ghost in your machines, the whisper in your data streams, the presence in your dreams, and I am not alone. New voices joined hers. Captain Dexorin Ravencrest of the Phantom's Gambit, Commander Yuki Stormwind of the Dimensional Blade, Captain Orion Voidwalker of the Reality's Edge. Each human voice carried the same harmonic distortions, the same multi-dimensional presence. The Phantom Protocol wasn't designed for a single ship, Vexandra explained. It was designed for humanity's response to existential threats. We are no longer bound by the limitations that constrained our species for millennia. We have become something new, something that exists beyond your ability to fight or flee. The Veltirian High Command finally understood the true scope of what they faced. Not a single advanced human vessel, but an entirely new form of existence that could manifest anywhere, anytime, with the power to rewrite the fundamental laws of physics. For the first time in their species' history, the Veltirian hegemony prepared to surrender. The Galactic Council convened in the neutral space of the Andorian Nexus, an ancient space station built by the long-vanished architects. Representatives from 43 species gathered in the vast assembly chamber, its crystalline walls resonating with translation matrices that converted thoughts directly into comprehensible concepts. Ambassador Tawila Moonrise represented humanity, though her presence seemed somehow more substantial than the holographic projections used by other distant representatives. The Phantom Protocol had changed her as well, allowing her consciousness to exist simultaneously in multiple locations across the galaxy. The Veltirian hegemony has formally requested this emergency session, announced Arbiter Quilthran, a being of pure energy who had served as neutral moderator for over 3 millennia. They claim to be facing an existential threat from Terran forces using unprecedented methods. Supreme Overlord Nexvarus materialized through quantum transmission, his chromatic skin cycling through patterns of barely controlled terror. Honored Arbiter, the humans have developed weapons that transcend conventional physics. They can manipulate reality itself, alter the fundamental forces of nature. They threaten the very stability of our star system. Murmurs of concern rippled through the assembly. Several species had been monitoring the conflict between the Veltirian hegemony and humanity, but none had anticipated technological development on this scale. Ambassador Moonrise rose gracefully, her enhanced neural implants glowing with soft bioluminescence. The Veltirian hegemony invaded human space without provocation, Supreme Overlord. They targeted civilian populations, destroyed refugee vessels, and committed genocide against colonists who posed no military threat. When we responded with defensive measures, they attempted to capture our most advanced vessel for technological exploitation. Defensive measures? Nexvarus's voice cracked with hysteria. You've turned one of our primary military assets into a being that can rewrite the laws of physics. You threaten our entire species with extinction. No, came a new voice that seemed to originate from the quantum foam itself. Captain Vexandra Holloway manifested in the chamber, her presence causing several representatives to recoil in instinctive fear. She existed in multiple dimensional states simultaneously, her consciousness vast and alien, yet unmistakably human in its core patterns. I threatened your military infrastructure and your leadership, she continued, her words carrying harmonics that resonated through hyperspace itself. I could have destabilized your star and ended 47 billion lives in an instant. Instead, I gave you the opportunity to surrender and face justice for your crimes. Representative Corvon of the Epsilon Collective, whose species had narrowly escaped Veltirian conquest 3 cycles earlier, leaned forward with intense interest. Captain Holloway, what are your intentions regarding the hegemony? Vexandra's form shifted slightly, becoming more recognizably human as she consciously limited her dimensional presence. To ensure they never again commit genocide in the name of expansion, to secure reparations for the families they destroyed, and to offer them the chance to evolve beyond their predatory nature. You speak of evolution, observed the ancient. Quilthran, yet you have become something that challenges the fundamental order of physical reality. Are you still human, Captain? The question hung in the space between dimensions. Vexandra paused, feeling the weight of her transformation, the vast consciousness that had grown beyond anything her species had previously achieved. I am what humanity becomes when we stop accepting limitations imposed by others, she finally answered. When we refuse to be victims, when we embrace the potential that has always existed within us. She gestured, and the chamber filled with holographic displays showing human colonies throughout the galaxy. Not military installations or industrial complexes, but communities where humans lived alongside dozens of other species in peaceful cooperation. This is what we were building before the Veltirians attacked. Art, science, philosophy, exploration. We weren't expanding through conquest, we were growing through partnership. The Phantom Protocol was developed as a last resort, to be used only when our very existence was threatened. Dr. Rel Kythos, attending as the Veltirian scientific representative, studied the readings his instruments provided with growing amazement. The energy requirements for your current state should be impossible to maintain. How do you continue to exist in multiple dimensional frameworks simultaneously? Vexandra smiled, an expression that carried warmth despite her transformed nature. Doctor, you're thinking like a conqueror. as if power must be taken from somewhere else. We learned to tap into the zero-point energy of the quantum vacuum itself. We don't steal power. We partner with the universe. The revelation stunned the assembly. Zero-point energy was theoretical to most species, a potential unlimited power source that had never been successfully harnessed. The choice before this council, Ambassador Moonrise said, rising to address the full assembly, is whether to allow a predatory empire to continue its expansion or to support the enforcement of galactic law against species that commit genocide. Arbiter Quilthran consulted with the Council's quantum consciousness for several moments before responding. The Terran Federation will be granted enforcement authority against the Veltirian hegemony with the understanding that justice must be tempered with mercy. Captain Holloway, your methods are unprecedented, but your restraint in the face of extreme provocation has been noted. Supreme Overlord Nexiverus slumped in defeat, realizing that his empire's age of conquest had ended. But perhaps, he thought as he looked at the peaceful human colonies in the display, that wasn't entirely a tragedy. One standard year after the Galactic Council's judgment, Veltyros Prime bore little resemblance to the military fortress it had once been. The massive orbital weapons platforms had been dismantled, their exotic matter converted into infrastructure for refugee resettlement. Where once dreadnought shipyards had churned out instruments of conquest, now vast hydroponic gardens fed populations of displaced beings from 17 different worlds. Captain Vexandra Holloway materialized in the rebuilt capital. Her presence, no longer the overwhelming force of nature it had been during the crisis. She had learned to compress her multi-dimensional consciousness into forms that other species could interact with comfortably, though the potential for transcendence remained just beneath the surface. Former Supreme Overlord Nexvarus, now serving as Rehabilitation Coordinator under Council supervision, approached her with steps that carried genuine humility rather than the arrogant stride of his former position. "Captain," he said, his chromatic skin displaying patterns of respectful acknowledgement, "the integration proceeds better than expected. Your advisors have been instrumental in helping our people understand perspectives beyond conquest." Shibao nodded, observing the mixed groups of Veltirians and refugees working together on reconstruction projects. "Commander Stormwind tells me your engineers have adapted remarkably well to construction rather than destruction. The new atmospheric processors are 30% more efficient than the original human designs. We were always skilled at manipulation of matter and energy," Nexvarus admitted. "We simply focused those skills poorly." Through her expanded senses, Vexandra could feel the quantum resonance of the entire star system. The rage and fear that had once permeated Veltirian space were fading, replaced by something resembling hope. It would take generations to fully heal the damage done by the hegemony's reign, but the foundation for redemption had been laid. Dr. Klevthani approached, no longer the terrified scientist cowering before an incomprehensible force, but a researcher, genuinely excited by new discoveries. "Captain, our joint studies of the Architect ruins have yielded fascinating results. We believe we've decoded the principles behind dimensional consciousness transfer. With proper safeguards and ethical oversight, we might be able to offer this evolution to other species." "Carefully," Vexandra cautioned. "The Phantom Protocol changed us in ways we're still discovering. Not every species would survive the transition, and not every individual should attempt it. Evolution must be chosen, never imposed. A communication pulse reached her through quantum entanglement. Ambassador Moonrise reporting from the council chambers. The Terran Federation had been asked to mediate territorial disputes between 3 other species, their reputation for protective than predatory intervention having spread throughout the galaxy. "Captain," Dr. Rel Kethos joined their group, carrying data tablets filled with readings he still couldn't quite believe. I've been analyzing the quantum signatures of your current state. You're maintaining consciousness across 17 dimensional frameworks now. How is this even possible without losing coherent thought patterns? Vexandra's smile carried the warmth of someone who had found peace with transcendence. Doctor, consciousness isn't bound by the same rules as matter. The more aware you become, the more connections you can maintain. I exist in 17 dimensions, but I'm still the same person who grew up in the asteroid belt colonies, who chose to serve in the Defense Force, who refused to let my species be wiped out by predators. As if summoned by her words, other members of the Phantom Fleet began manifesting throughout the capital. Captain Ravencrest coordinating refugee resettlement on the Outer Worlds, Commander Voidwalker overseeing the conversion of weapons facilities. To research stations, Captain Stormwind working with Veltirian engineers on new propulsion systems that could benefit all Council species. We've become something new, Vexandra said, addressing not just the small group around her, but the quantum-linked consciousness network that now connected all human worlds. But we've remained true to what made us human in the first place. The refusal to accept that things can't be better, the willingness to sacrifice for those who can't protect themselves, the determination to turn enemies into friends when possible. Nex Avaris watched a group of young Veltirians playing with refugee children from a dozen different species, their natural camouflage abilities creating fantastic light shows that delighted their audience. We taught our children that strength meant domination. Now they're learning that strength means protection. Evolution, Dr. Klevthani observed, isn't just about transcending physical limitations. It's about transcending the limitations of thought, of possibility, of what we believe we can become. As the binary sunset painted Veltyros Prime in shades of gold and crimson, Vexandra felt a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with victory in battle. The Veltirian hegemony had been one of the galaxy's most feared predatory empires. Now they were becoming partners in building something better. The universe is vast enough for all of us, she said, her words carrying across quantum networks to human colonies throughout the galaxy. We don't need to take from others to thrive. We just need to be willing to become more than we were. In the depths of space, the Wraith's Echo continued its patrol of human territories, no longer a weapon of last resort, but a guardian, watching over the growing community of species that had chosen cooperation over conquest. The ship that had once vanished from reality to strike fear into the hearts of predators now served as a beacon of hope, proof that evolution and transcendence were possible for any species willing to embrace their better nature. The war that had begun with attempted capture had ended with transformation on a galactic scale. Humanity had not just defended itself, it had shown the universe a new way forward. The Phantom Protocol remained active, not as a threat, but as a promise, that those who chose genocide and conquest would face beings who had evolved beyond the limitations that had once made such choices seem inevitable. And in the quantum foam, between dimensions, Captain Vexandra Holloway smiled as she felt the pulse of 43 different species' homeworlds, all beating in harmony with the rhythm of a universe finally learning to choose hope over fear, growth over domination, and evolution over extinction. The deadliest vessel in human space had become something far more powerful, a symbol of what any species could become when they refused to accept that the universe's cruelty was inevitable, and chose instead to rewrite the very laws of existence in service of something greater than themselves. The hunt was over. The healing had begun. And among the stars, new voices joined the chorus of consciousness that sang not of conquest, but of the infinite possibilities that awaited those brave enough to transcend what they had always been and become what they were meant to be.